The fog rolled like a living thing across the cobblestone streets of Ashford Manor. Gas lamps flickered weakly in the chill air, casting long, distorted shadows. Every creak of the floorboards inside the manor was amplified, echoing like gunfire through the stone corridors. Evelyn Harper ran. Her skirts were soaked, her shoes slippery against the wet stone. In her hands, she clutched a folded letter, the paper damp from rain, the ink smudged but legible. Her knuckles were white as she held it, as if the slightest drop could undo everything. She was nothing, just a servant, until the night everyone thought she was dead. But the truth? It would change the crown forever. The manor was silent but for the distant roar of the wind and the occasional bark of a hound. Evelyn could feel the weight of the house's eyes upon her, even in its empty halls. She knew they were hunting her. The order had been given. The heir, the infant child of the Ashford line, was meant to die. And Evelyn, a mere maid, had stumbled upon the secret. She pressed herself against the cold, damp wall, trying to steady her breath. Her heart pounded, threatening to betray her location with every thud. Shadows danced grotesquely across the corridor as a torch flickered, carried by a figure she did not recognize at first. The heavy boots drew closer, commanding, relentless. The letter, she whispered to herself. I must keep it safe. They cannot know. The letter contained every detail, the plan, the execution, the names of conspirators. Lady Margaret, the matriarch of the house, had written it herself. It was precise, cruel, and terrifying. Evelyn's stomach twisted. The baby was alive, depending on her, and the people sworn to protect him intended to kill him in his crib. She could not let that happen. She turned a corner and nearly collided with a maid she had known since childhood. But the woman's expression was blank, chilling. Then, recognition. Then betrayal. Evelyn, the woman whispered. What are you doing here? Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. A lie formed in her mouth, cleaning. I didn't hear you. The other woman's eyes narrowed. You shouldn't be here at this hour. Behind her, the sounds of the guard's pursuit grew louder. Evelyn swallowed her panic, pressed the letter closer to her chest, and ran. She didn't look back. Not yet. Survival depended on forward motion. Evelyn had arrived at Ashford Manor 5 years earlier. A poor orphan with nothing but determination and a sharp mind, she had been taken in as a servant. Her role was simple: scrub floors, polish silver, and remain invisible. She did all of that and more. She observed. She memorized. She learned the intricacies of power, of deception, of wealth. The Ashford family believed she was nothing more than a dutiful, obedient maid. But in reality, she was learning everything she needed to survive, and eventually, to fight back. Now, with the letter in her hands and the heir's life in her arms, she realized her knowledge was worth more than ever. It wasn't just about survival. It was about justice. And maybe, power. She ducked through a hidden servant's passage, a narrow, claustrophobic corridor that few knew existed. Damp stone pressed against her shoulders as she moved, the baby swaddled tightly against her chest. She whispered, I will keep you safe. I promise. Outside, the fog made the world unrecognizable. Alleyways twisted into dead ends. Carriages rattled by, unaware of the drama unfolding in their midst. Evelyn kept to the shadows, slipping past the city's dark edges, relying on her wits and the memory of the streets she had once known as an orphan. For weeks, Evelyn survived in the shadows. She moved from tavern to tavern, sleeping in empty attics, begging for work, bribing anyone who might expose her. Every day was a gamble. Every encounter could be her last. The baby, whom she had named Henry, was her reason to endure. He was too young to understand danger, yet he was her anchor. Evelyn knew that if anything happened to him, her purpose would vanish. She learned quickly that survival depended not just on hiding, but on thinking several steps ahead. Every guard, every loyal servant, every spy could be a threat. Evelyn began to manipulate rumors, sowing confusion among those who sought her. By the time the Ashfords realized she had escaped, she was already several moves ahead. It was during this time that Evelyn began to understand her own power. Knowledge, secrecy, cunning, these were weapons far sharper than any blade. And slowly, a plan began to form in her mind. Not just to survive, but to reclaim the destiny that had been stolen from her and the child she now protected. Years passed. Evelyn's face, once known throughout the manor, was now unrecognizable. Her hair, dyed a darker shade, framed a sharper, more mature expression. She returned to Ashford Manor not as a maid, but as a wealthy widow from the countryside. She had money, poise, and an unassuming air that masked her true purpose. The Ashfords, unaware of the survival of the heir, or that Evelyn had been the one to protect him, welcomed her cautiously. She smiled politely, offered small talk, and observed. Every conversation, every glance, every gesture was a move on a chessboard she now controlled. Lady Margaret, still calculating and cold, suspected nothing. Evelyn's apparent meekness and wealth were her perfect disguise. And behind it all, she held the ultimate power, knowledge. Evelyn's opportunity came during a lavish ball thrown in honor of the Ashford family's continued prominence. She moved like a shadow through the crowd, watching, listening, calculating. Every whisper of gossip, every rumor, every secret slipped into her ears. And then she struck, not with violence, but with revelation. She produced documents, letters, and evidence proving Lady Margaret's plot to murder the royal heir years ago. The room froze. Faces went pale. Gasps echoed through the chandeliers. The revelation was complete. The truth, undeniable. Evelyn Harper, once invisible, once powerless, now held the fate of the Ashford dynasty in her hands. And in that moment, the Maid became the queen. Not by birth, but by courage, intelligence, and survival against all odds. The manor had not changed much. Its halls were just as oppressive, its portraits just as cold, and the scent of polished wood mixed with lingering candle smoke was unmistakable. Evelyn moved through the grand entrance as though she belonged, her posture impeccable, her gaze unassuming. The wealthy widow from the countryside, she thought, smiling to herself. A mask, and a perfectly crafted one at that. No one suspected the truth. No one knew that under her fine gloves and expensive gowns, she carried the same cunning and fear that had kept Henry alive for years. And no one realized that the child she protected, the rightful heir, still lived. Lady Margaret, standing at the top of the grand staircase, observed the newcomer. Her eyes, sharp as knives, flicked over Evelyn, but did not recognize the woman who had been a lowly servant years ago. "Welcome," she said smoothly, her voice a polished weapon. "We do not see many new faces at Ashford Manor these days." Evelyn bowed lightly, a practiced gesture that hid the storm within. "I've heard much about this house, about the family," she said softly. "I would be honored to visit." And with that, the game began. Evelyn's every step, every word, was calculated. She would need to learn alliances, weaknesses, and secrets. Above all, she would need to protect Henry, who now stayed hidden in a distant safe house under trusted guardians. Evelyn had only been back for a week when she began to realize how deep the rot in the Ashford family went. Servants whispered of bribes, of affairs, of plots that could topple even the strongest aristocrats. And at the center of it all was Lady Margaret, a woman whose ambition knew no moral bounds. But Evelyn was no longer a scared child hiding from the cruelty of the world. She was a strategist. She observed the staff carefully, noting who was loyal, who was fearful, and who could be turned. Every whispered conversation, every stolen glance, every subtle inflection became ammunition in her arsenal. At night, she walked alone through the manor's darkened halls, imagining the old servant passages she once knew. She remembered the secret tunnels, the hidden doors behind libraries, the servant staircases that led to nowhere. They were no longer just escapes, they were paths to power. Her first major challenge came sooner than expected. A sudden illness struck the household, a strange fever that swept through servants and minor family members alike. In a house built on control, fear quickly spread. Rumors began that the illness was not natural. Poison. Sabotage. Evelyn saw opportunity. With careful observation, she began to influence events. A misplaced tray here, a whispered warning there. Slowly, she guided suspicion away from herself while testing the loyalties of those around her. Every movement was calculated. Every smile hit a razor-sharp mind. Then came the night she overheard a conversation she was never meant to hear, Lady Margaret, alone with a trusted advisor, plotting again. This time, the target was a minor heir, one of the Ashford children who could threaten Henry's claim. Evelyn's stomach turned. If she did not act soon, another child would die. Desperate, Evelyn sought allies in the least likely of places, the kitchen staff. They had survived years of abuse, fear, and neglect, and now, many were willing to risk everything for her cause. They whispered to her, brought information, and even smuggled letters. One ally, Thomas, a former stable boy with nothing to lose, proved invaluable. He had seen the darkest sides of the Ashfords and owed Evelyn a debt she had not even asked him to repay. Together, they began to construct a plan, a subtle infiltration that would allow her to control information, manipulate evidence, and shield Henry from any further threats. But danger lurked everywhere. Even a careless word could betray her. And Evelyn, ever vigilant, knew she had enemies not just in the family, but among those she trusted. The first betrayal came from an unexpected quarter. A maid she had once trusted whispered to Lady Margaret about her supposed, wealthy widow, identity. Evelyn had anticipated suspicion, but not so soon. That night, she confronted the woman quietly, away from prying eyes. "You could have saved yourself," Evelyn said softly, her voice cold yet controlled. "Instead, you chose death." The maid trembled, realizing that Evelyn knew everything. The choice was clear, loyalty or ruin. And slowly, the tide turned. Word spread among the servants, Evelyn Harper was no longer the quiet girl from the corridors. She was a force. A shadow with power that no one could see coming. Months passed. Evelyn moved quietly but decisively, planting seeds of influence, learning secrets, and shaping events in the manor. Every whisper of fear, every argument, every scandal became a tool in her hands. She did not just survive anymore, she controlled. Servants, minor family members, even distant nobility who visited Ashford Manor began to defer to her subtly, unaware of her true identity. And all the while, Henry grew stronger in the shadows. Trained, intelligent, and unseen, he became the symbol of a destiny that Evelyn would not let die. The day came when she could act openly. She gathered evidence of Lady Margaret's original plot, the murder of the infant heir, and revealed it at a public gathering, in front of the family and their allies. Shock froze the room. Gasps, whispers, the sharp intake of breath. The matriarch herself was exposed. And in that instant, Evelyn Harper had not only survived but claimed a new power. It was a quiet evening when Evelyn finally returned to the nursery, not as a maid, not as a widow, but as the queen in all but name. Henry, the child she had protected for years, stood beside her. The room was filled with the weight of history, secrets, and lives saved. Lady Margaret, stripped of her influence, glared at Evelyn with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You, how?" she whispered. Evelyn smiled faintly, a predator at rest. "Survival, cunning, and the refusal to accept injustice," she replied. The court of the manor, the staff, even the family, realized that nothing would ever be the same. Evelyn Harper, the girl who had once run through the foggy halls, terrified for her life, had become the power that ruled them all. But victory came with a price. Evelyn's rise had not gone unnoticed beyond the manor walls. Rivals plotted, spies watched, and whispers in London streets spoke of the woman who had defied the Ashford dynasty. Even now, years later, as Henry grew into a man unaware of his full heritage, Evelyn remained vigilant. Her intelligence, courage, and audacity had elevated her from the shadows to the crown, but the story of survival was never truly over. Because in a world built on power and fear, the price of ambition is eternal vigilance, and the line between triumph and tragedy is thinner than a servant's whisper.